Well, hello everyone, and welcome along to Unplug It. It was a tough watch on Sunday to start the season, but as we'll dissect this, not exactly unexpected, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a crisis, but obviously it was a pretty brutal afternoon to start the season. A sobering start in many respects, but it really is all about the response. When I was sort of assessing it on Sunday, I thought, well, there was a test put in front of us, which we didn't pass. There were mitigating factors at play, of course. It was always going to make that difficult, and you don't throw up excuses at that level, but there are reasons why you're not going to be at your best, and there can be a perfect storm of things that can all come together to lead to what happened, and that was really one of those where the Crows have improved in the off-season. They had a strong pre-season. They beat Brisbane in their last hit out. They were basically at full strength. I think they had every single player available. They're a very good attacking side. Their midfield has got better. We're undermanned in defence. We're undermanned in attack, extremely so. And then we got belted in the midfield, which is the perfect storm at a venue we never win at against a team we never beat, with 4 debutants, with probably another 4 players underdone. I think if anybody expected something other than that, I'd be surprised. And look, it's natural that people fire out messages saying, this is a disgrace and embarrassing, and multiple things can be true at once. That was a bad loss and it was an ugly performance. But I reckon there were 4 or 5 performances over the weekend that were worse than ours and more head scratching than ours. That's a thumping. But there are a lot of reasons why it happened. So it's all about the response now. What do you do as you start to roll players back? You get back to Melbourne for the next couple of weeks and see where it lands from there. But Nick, I reckon if someone had have said on Thursday, Adelaide will kick the first 5, you'll be 5 or 6 goals down at half time, they'll blow it out, you'll hang in there, you'll get beaten by about 10 goals, you'd be like, yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah, something like that. Look, I just want to reiterate, I don't think that this is panic stations at all. Yes, it was hard to watch. Yes, it was uncomfortable, and it made you feel uncomfortable because the gap in talent, the gap in performance was so wide. But these are legitimate mitigating circumstances, and you don't like to use injuries as an excuse and personnel as an excuse, but we were missing between 7 and 10 kind of best 23 type players, plus a bunch underdone, a bunch of state level players having their first game. Jack McRae, who was our best player, his first game for the club, and those guys that are out, we're talking about almost our entire forward line, leaving with just a small forward as our kind of major experienced forward. Our two of our 3 or 4 kind of key prime movers in the middle in Marshall and Sinclair, who might be our 2 most important players, 2 of our 3 most important players potentially, very underdone. I mean, they were not right. Marshall copying the knock early didn't help either. And then, like you said, the debutants were essentially, there was an international who barely kicked a footy until 18 months ago, and then a bunch of state level players who had been around the mark at the state level for a little while. But, what are we expecting them to come in and be world beaters in game 1 against a side that's been building for 5 or 6 years at home, wanting to make a mark early because they were disappointed with how last year finished. The Crows had a point to prove, and that team, that squad's been building for something for the last half a decade, and they're just about there. They've been around the mark for a while. They had a disappointing finish to last season, but I think that they're a pretty good team, the Crows. They've been a pretty good team for a little while. You take last year's ladder out of the equation, they've been around the mark for a while. They're a big-bodied, strong, powerful unit. They run and carry. Their disposal skills are good. It was a little bit of the perfect storm, a little bit, in that we needed everything to go right for us to even be competitive, and so much went wrong, and ultimately we weren't. And that's what we saw, I think. And I think I actually don't think that we learned a whole lot out of this. I think the most we learned was that Adelaide are pretty good, and that us, when you take, 7, 8, 9 of our best players out of the squad, and you play a bunch of underdone, underdone vets and a bunch of kids who have never played before, it's going to be really hard to compete against good teams.
And I guess, H, on that, I mean, it wasn't so much if we look at those first gamers. I mean, McRae, experienced player, our best on the day, but the debutantes, Boyd, I thought certainly held his own, 27 hit-outs and competed. Nothing wrong with what he put up there. Had to carry most of the ruckload with Rowe underdone. Obviously, O'Connell found it a little bit tough in defence when they were under siege. And then obviously Hall gave us a bit of spark and looked okay, probably the pick of the debutants that we saw. I guess if there was an issue, and you give excuses to Hunter Clark coming in as a sub underdone, you probably give excuses to Zach Jones, like marginally being underdone, you give excuses to Rowe and a few others. But I thought the likes of, and we'll probably discuss this in our awards later, that maybe a couple of the other senior players we needed a little bit more from. Namely Hill and probably the skipper as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're the seasoned players. They're the ones who know the level you need to be to hit the ground running in round one. And as you say, a bunch of them look like they'd only just got back from Christmas holidays. We hear about the running programs and everything that we have down the club, and we're some of the best runners you'll see. Have we just ran so much we're completely stuffed already? The question's there is, are we that good at runners? Because at times you see him just being passed, and it was a bit of okay, we might think we're good on our own track, but up against an opposition, we've looked slow. So it's a couple of things there, thinking, okay, have we hit it too hard in the off season and stuff before we get to the first round, and do we need to just level that out and try to hit the first round running? It's not going to get any easier on a hard surface at Marvel next week. It's you can run probably a little bit better on a hard surface, but that's a bit more taxing than Adelaide Oval. Adelaide Oval is probably one of the nicest grounds you could play on. So it's a little concern there, thinking, okay, what has all that preseason been the lead up to? But as Nick's saying, Adelaide were expected to go up last year. They were picked to be the bolter last year and disappointed majorly. I didn't see it happening. Like, I didn't think they were going to go top 4 or anything last year, but I thought they were going to improve, which they didn't. But yeah, this year they're primed and ready to go, and it's unfortunate we've come up against another one of our teams that we never play at home situations, and copped it first week. We're the only Victorian team playing interstate. It was a bit of a here you go, take this and go try to keep up with them. So yeah, it'd be nice to be back home again, but hopefully we can turn up. We can hopefully get some of our seasoned players in there ready and firing, and let's just put that behind us and go, all right, start again this week.
Even I just think we got bullied out of it. Like I don't know that we ever stopped running, or that we kind of. I mean, we certainly seemed to lose a step in pace, like you said, H. But I wonder how much of that was mental, just being physically bullied at the contest, and that ultimately, Darren, that's what you were saying before about those experienced guys, the older guys that needed to show more and take that step forward and really put their stamp on the game, because that's where a big body like a Jack Steele or we saw McRae do it, but Sinclair obviously is an experienced too. He's not the biggest guy, but you hope that someone like him with another week in his legs now can be better for the run. Cal Wilkie, you had 19 touches, but it felt like you didn't see him, and that's just because the volume of ball going into their forward 50 was just enormous. Mason Wood, I thought was pretty good. I thought he presented well, but we needed him kind of forward. We needed him forward and not at the coalface where another big body, tall running guy could have been really useful. And ultimately, the young kids in there, Burns, Garcia, etc. They were just almost mesmerised by the Crows midfielders who just seemed to get there first, be able to shake them off super easily. Like, I'm not sure I can remember another game where your tackles just didn't seem to stick as much as they did. Like, it seemed like boys versus men in a lot of regards. And I thought some of the kids showed a bit, like you said, Hall was good. I thought Hasty was solid.
Yeah.
If not good, I thought he was solid at worst, and was very surprised when he was subbed out. And I wonder if there's some backstory there, something that we don't know, because it felt like there was a bunch of guys that could have been subbed out before Hasty. But yeah, you're right. Wilson was great. I thought Darcy Wilson was really good. Naz was really good. But you need more from Steele, Sinclair, Wilkie, Wood, and those guys to really start putting making their authority felt. Like, these are not kids anymore. Sinclair's not young. Wood's not young. Even someone like Caminiti, who's only been in the system for a couple of seasons, but he's got a big body. He's got a big frame. He can really make himself large. Jimmy Webster, can put his body on the line as we've seen. You really needed someone to kind of stand up and put their body on the line and say, no, we're not going to take this. And it just felt like no one was able to do that and stop the rot. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and I think you can look slow when you don't have the ball, and it can look like there's a lack of effort when you're getting belted. And I think a couple of things that were concerning, obviously when Hall missed his 2 shots in the first quarter, which is neither here nor there, Adelaide went coast to coast on both of them. Now, I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but I would think that over the last couple of years, we would have been one of the best teams in the comp at stopping that. We've been a very good side ourselves at connecting from our defence into scoring, but part of our defensive pressure in our system, sides don't just run straight through us like that. We might get beaten in clearances, we give up goals from stoppages and that type of thing, but that was a little bit alarming, and I think that comes down to probably being a little bit disorganised. You've got guys that haven't played in that system before, you've got guys that are a yard off the pace, and it only takes 1 or 2 of those links in the chain to break down. So everything I saw made sense. Doesn't make it any easier to watch, but it all made sense. It was a tough hand, and we just didn't quite deal with it. And I know Ross pointed to that last year when we had the tough fixture at the start of the year and the injuries, that's a challenge that you either confront or you don't, and we didn't pass. We didn't pass this one either, but it's not a crisis necessarily. We'll obviously see what does happen. I mean, the injury list will be interesting when we touch on all of that as well. And yeah, the Hasty one, I was critical of that on Twitter, and I think that's fair enough. I think if someone like a Brad Hill's had 2 touches to that stage of the game and Marshall can barely move, I know Zach Jones needs minutes in the legs and those sorts of things, but I would have been more inclined to give Hasty a run. I know looking at the stats, he had 10 in the first quarter, and when he got subbed off, he had 12 halfway through the third. So that means that he's gone into witness protection after quarter time. But obviously he was, lively early, and I reckon you give him the chance to sort of run through that, see if he can pick it up and get those opportunities later on. But yeah, we'll see how that all does unfold. I guess a few of the other things out of that, we'll touch on the Ross contract soon, but obviously the match itself, you've put a note in the rundown, which, contrary to popular opinion, we do actually prepare one of those. But the Paddy Dow question, I didn't listen to the presser straight away. I usually do that the morning after when I walk the dog. It's sort of cathartic. But I did read your comment on the Dow question in a chat group, and then I listened to it the next day. It was interesting. So for those who haven't heard it, as they were about to leave, they said, do you have any clarity on Paddy Dow, who had the infection in the knee over Christmas, spent time in hospital, multiple operations, and it sounds like a pretty nasty situation. You got the impression from Ross that it was maybe even nastier than perhaps we were aware of. But when he was asked, he was basically pressing it, saying, what have you heard? What have you heard? What have you heard? Now, Nick, what did you make of that? Because I haven't heard anybody suggesting anything other than what it was. So I don't know whether people are badgering the club, but I thought that was completely taken on face value.
Yeah, look, I said this in that chat group that you're referring to, and I feel like Ross is. I think it was just a Rossism almost in that. Yeah, I think it was a fair enough question. What can you tell us about Paddy Dow? The journo asked, "Do you have any clarity on Paddy Dow's recovery?" And Ross, being Ross, is like, "Of course, I've got clarity. I'm the coach of the club. Of course, I know what's going on. Of course, we know what's going on." And he took that question for whatever reason very specifically. You're asking about, does he have clarity? Of course, he's got clarity. He's the head coach and the senior figure at the footy club. Of course, he knows what's going on. Just because we don't know what's going on and the journos don't know what's going on doesn't mean that the club doesn't know what's going on. Of course, the club knows what's going on. And then just kind of went into this a bit of a defensive reaction around Paddy. And I think we've all heard the stories from the players that played under Ross V1 about how he could be that father figure and really kind of, when you're with him, he's your father figure and he'll defend you to the hilt. As long as you do all the right things and you do right by him, then he's going to do right by you every single time. And I think that sometimes, especially through that period, we didn't see that much of it because of the bubble and the way that the club, kind of acted in media opportunities and that type of stuff. We didn't really see it. But I think this was Ross being Daddy Ross. Like, this is my boy and I've got your back. And Paddy, you don't worry about anything. You go and get better. Don't worry about what people are saying, what people are asking. You don't stress about it. We've got you. I've got you. You just go get better because you've had a real rough trot. Don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of it. And that's just kind of what it felt like. It was just like prickly Ross looking after one of his boys who's been doing it tough, and really taking the question very literally. Even though I think any one of us would have gone, the journo asked us, "Do you have any clarity?" Like, yeah, this is what's going on. He's okay, but it's been rough. Ross is like, "Of course I've got clarity. I'm Ross. I'm Ross the boss. I've got clarity. Yeah, of course I do."
There's a bit of I know what I know. What do you know? Well, come on, you tell me what you know, sort of thing, and I'll still won't say if it's right or not. But trying to, I guess, make them tell the story rather than him giving anything away, and it's a situation. You go, look, he's wants the best for our players, and he's the journo asking a question at the end of a press conference is going to be the first to know anything. And that's exactly how he wants it. That's exactly how we want him to be.
Yeah, and then look, it was not a particularly silly question, marginally poorly worded in terms of clarity, because of course the club's going to know. Like, it's obvious they know the answer. The only question is whether they would tell us or whether they would reveal all. But yeah, look, it does sound like it's a pretty ordinary situation for Paddy. And I guess the end of that answer, Ross said that he just got out of the pool and back onto the track. So running again, I guess that means. So who knows how long that is? He's still TBC on the injury list, as you'd imagine, but you'd be thinking that's halfway through the season or something.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate. Yeah, unfortunate for Paddy, amongst a number of other things. On the Ross one, before we wrap up that game with Boats, I had a theory with his contract extension by 1 year, which is an unusual thing. So end of 2026 to end of 2027. So the three theories, one more likely, second less likely, third even less likely. I think the consensus would be the most likely outcome would be some suggestions around a handover of sorts in a few years' time, probably with Corey Enright. The second of those options would be to keep Tassie at bay by extending that out a little bit longer. And the third would have been, which I think is probably the least likely, or maybe the Tassie one's the least likely, but was the club forecasting that they might have some battles over the course of the season and wanted to answer those questions early to put that to bed. But I mean, the reason I had that as unlikely is because I don't think it works. I mean, Port Adelaide signed off on Ken Hinkley's succession plan. They get beaten by 100 points in round one, and people are straight away like, well, why don't you just sack him now then? So I don't think it changed. All it does is change the question. It doesn't stop the questions. It just slightly alters what they ask. So what are we thinking, H? Are we leaning towards not succession plan, but something like that?
I had that feeling and had other people basically thinking exactly the same thing as well. It's seems like that's almost a logical answer. Enright almost, feels like a coach in waiting now. And that's what we didn't have when we went and got Ross again. There wasn't that coach in waiting to sort of step in. Everyone's saying, "Oh, why'd we take him? Why'd we take him?" And it's like, what else was there? Who was out there that was ready to go? Who was out there that was ready to step into that position? That I don't think we're in a position to have just thrown in someone new who hadn't coached the senior team before, or I think we needed that experienced coach in. And I get the feeling there is this plan of have him there with Enright under him and learn the last few steps that he needs to know. And as far as I'm aware, there is a fair bit of interest in Enright already. So whether we're going to shore that up as well and just say to him, look, it's there waiting for you when you're ready to take it. We might see Ross go another year after that as well. We might see, who knows? It's you don't want to force it upon him. You go, all right, so when you're ready, you let us know. And it'd be good. As I say in all reports, he sounds like he's very switched on and knows pretty well what he's going to be doing, and it'd be good for him to be handed a team that he's been involved with for quite some time and is travelling pretty nicely. So in a couple of years' time, that could be the exact situation. And that handover time could be exactly. I mean, he may be whether he'd be a target for Tassie, I think they probably would be going to some experience, but there's probably a little bit of truth behind that too.
I'm kind of the opposite. I think it's a lot more likely that the club has in fact seen that this year is going to be tough. I think back to, there was a tweet from the Saint on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it now. The St STK Football, really good account, worth a follow. It was a couple of weeks ago, I think, where he basically said that since Ross took over, we've turned over at least a third of our list, something like that. And you look at the experienced guys that are out, Crouch, Membry, Gresham, Battle, Billings, Patton, Caulfield, Ross. These are the staple guys of our lineup over the last 4 years, 5 years, if not more. You don't just get rid of that experience and those bodies and fill the team with young kids and expect to be winning games of footy every week. This is, I'm hesitant to call it a rebuild because the expectations are still there that we're going to go out and be competitive. And we weren't. Like, don't get me wrong, we weren't competitive on the weekend. But that's the expectation. And that is why someone like Ross was brought in, was for us to be competitive. I'm not sure the expectation is in the win-loss record this season. And I think even less so given what we've seen in the last month with the injury list, 6 weeks with the injury list, and the issues over the kind of the final month of the preseason, and how we've entered round one. I actually think that they probably have forecast that at least the first half of this season is going to be tough and we're going to lose more than we win. And ultimately, nobody would have been comfortable heading into 2026 with Ross Lyon being a dead man walking from a contract perspective, knowing that half this season, from a win-loss record, from an outside perception perspective, was going to be a failure. And so go into the final year of a contract almost like, well, you've got to make finals, you've got to win a final, you've got to make a semi-final or a prelim for you to keep your job. And then all of a sudden the pressure on a team like ours that really is pretty fragile is almost unbearable. And so if you're going to turn over the list, you've got to give the guy turning over the list a bit of time to actually make it happen. And we have turned over the list. We are turning over the list. We've hit the draft incredibly harder than we ever have probably over the last couple of seasons. And we've had a lot of wins out of that strategy. I think we've got to see this out now. And I think that's where the club, they haven't outright said that, but they're like, we got our man and we're backing him in. This is our strategy and we're going to see it through, whatever that looks like over the next 2 or 3 seasons. Maybe then at some point there's a handover or whatever, but that's becoming more and more common. But I think the way that I read it was like, he's our guy and we're going to back him in to do what he says he's going to do because we trust him.
Yeah, and look, I think it's a case of, and for what it's worth, it's only me saying it, but I think the club knows where they're at. I think there's no confusion, there's no disarray. I think we know it too. I think we're okay. Like our recruiting strategy is clear. We're getting more wins than losses in that space. We're turning the list over. We're clearing out players that have had their shot but haven't quite got us there. I think most of the talent on our list, you can see what's probably going to happen and you can see where it's going to go. It's just at the moment, obviously, we're vulnerable to setbacks. We're vulnerable to injuries and structure and that type of stuff. And we're feeling that at the moment. It sucks because, you see Hawthorn rebuild in, a month and, other little bits and pieces like that. But I think it's okay. So, I mean, my advice would be to not panic. And I mean, you can get a circuit breaker every now and then. I mean, we've beaten Geelong the last 3 times we've played them at Marvel. You win that game, and Adelaide's a distant memory and you're off and running. So, that's the way it works sometimes. So I'd hold the line regardless of what does happen. Wrapping up that game from a votes perspective, first votes of the year. For those unfamiliar with our voting process, it's not the standard 3-2-1. We have 10 votes available per host, and they could be used in any way they like. It could be 10 ones, it could be 110, which hasn't happened yet, I don't think. We might have got close a couple of times
almost could have happened.
Yeah, and it could have almost happened this weekend, potentially. But I've gone with a vote to a couple of players. I gave a vote to Hall. I thought, 16 possessions and a couple of goals on debut. A vote to Sinclair quite early, but I thought he at least was creative enough. Had 2 in the first quarter and ended up with 22 or 23, so he built into it. 2 votes to Darcy Wilson. I thought he looked pretty dangerous most of the way through, and it looked like he hasn't missed a beat on first evidence from last year. Couple to Nass, who was his usual creative self, had 27, went forward and kicked a goal. Nothing wrong with how he's come back. And Jack McRae, 34 possessions on debut. Huge numbers for a first-time Saint. You got to go back to the early 90s for, a first-time Saint to do something like that. So a really strong performance from him. H, how did you split your 10?
I sort of gave, in the end, votes to...
And that was 4 in case I mentioned it. But yeah.
Pretty much gave votes to players for almost a case of, okay, they probably had a positive impact on that number of quarters. It felt like there was only a few players who really stood up in a quarter and could be considered almost one of the best on the field in that quarter. I thought Garcia had a good run there for a little bit. I felt like he turned us a little bit for a short while and gave us a good bit of run, good bit of grunts, and he wasn't there the whole game, but yeah, there was a nice little run he had there, gave him 1. Windhager worked in the middle as hard as he could, and he was reasonable. Hopefully he might be able to pin down someone during most games this year, but also had that positive impact that he can have going forward as well. I thought his game was pretty good. As you say, Maxi Hall misses the 2 easy ones, gets the hard one. Could have had 4 on debut the way he played, and that would have been a great game. That first game, that's as much as you can ask from a debut. They're picked up as a mid-season draftee, and let's see how he goes. If he can continue, if he can keep on an average of 2 a week, it'd be fantastic. But I mean, we're probably not going to see that. But hey, he's shown us he can do it from the start. One to Wilson, ran as much as he does, and wasn't as impactful as he could be, as he has shown before. But hopefully he can, get back into Marvel and show us as we did against Geelong and late last year. Next week, that'll be good. To Naz, worked hard. He's probably still a fair bit away from his best, but did what he could on the day. It was, as I said, a lot of people he was trying to carry with him, and Jack McRae played 4 quarters of football with not as much support as he probably wanted and needs, but stood up all day. And it was head and shoulders above pretty well everyone out there, mostly on our side and most of them as well. So it was probably amongst some of the best on the whole ground.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to both of you guys. I gave 1 to Wood. I thought he battled hard and stood up as our experienced forward. I mean, he really was a key forward in the absence of just about everybody else, including Caminiti went forward. He was, just about not sighted. I gave a vote to Windhager. I thought he battled hard. I thought he tried hard in the middle. He used his body, used his frame, got around contest, and thought he was useful. Darcy Wilson showed a bit as he has so often. Just his ability to run and carry, kick long, all those types of things are really impactful when we didn't have a bunch of blokes that were willing to do that on the weekend. 2 to Naz, happy that he found the scoreboard. I think that we're a different team if someone like Nazai can start hitting the scoreboard a bit more, and a goal a game or thereabouts would put us in a pretty good position. And I gave 5 to Jack McRae. Pretty rare to see that on debut for a club. Probably our highest profile recruit for a little while, but that's exactly what we need from him. We need clearances. We need someone around the contest. We need someone ideally helping Jack Steele and helping the midfield unit as a whole. But he's got some tricks at the coalface. He can run, he can deliver the ball. We just needed a bunch of blokes to stand up next to him ultimately.
Yeah, which didn't happen enough for those, again, new to us. Welcome. We have a couple of other awards. The Jason Blake Award. Now, Jason Blake, one of the unsung heroes, did the job all the time without the recognition. 1 Brownlow vote or whatever it was, or 2. But 200 gamer, tremendous servant, but flew under the radar all the time. And there are probably a few of those this weekend. My first nomination, I mentioned him briefly at the start. I thought Boyd on debut. Now, not a kid, and obviously he's played in South Australia a lot, so not entirely unfamiliar territory, but 27 hit-outs, 12 possessions. I thought he competed pretty well against O'Brien, who's a handy ruckman. Obviously, our midfield group was under siege, but I thought he was all right. So that was at least a step. And obviously Marshall wasn't able to, as the senior man, give him as much support, given he was underdone and then got hurt a bit early. So I've given it to the big fella boy. Nick, who's your Jason Black?
Probably unusual one. I gave mine to Jack Higgins just for this particular situation in a game where we were clearly outmuscled, outgunned, outplayed, just about everywhere on the field. Our ball use when we had it was deplorable. We were pressured into mistakes all the time, and even when we weren't pressured that much, we still made mistakes. Delivery inside 50, as it has been for millennia, was awful. Higgins is a small forward and probably our most experienced forward with Mason Wood. Had 11 touches and had 4 shots on goal, 4 scoring shots. He just gives us a different look when he's on, and if we can rectify our ball use and delivery, as we've been saying for years, then we can actually put together a pretty dangerous forward line when they're all out there. And in the absence of just about everybody else, I thought Higgins still provided an outlet. Didn't get the rewards, so to speak, as much as he potentially could have. But I thought he tried hard in his role, and we haven't spoken about Higgins at all today, and I don't think we've heard a lot about him since that game. I mean, I'm probably understandable given no one wants to talk about us in general, but I thought he played his role pretty well in a team that was comfortably outplayed.
Yeah, last time we saw him, he was the hero against Carlton. But yeah, I thought he was. He looked dangerous most of the way through. Just starved a bit of opportunities, but he was on. H, yours?
And I'd have to go with another guy who got 2 goals, and we again won't hear a lot about him. He's not the red carpet recruits Richmond had. He's not the up in lights Reed. He's Maxie Hall. I mean, as I said just before, he did everything he had to do as a debutant. Maybe if he kicks or he can finish those goals off that he missed earlier might have just given us a little bit more momentum early on. But hey, you can't ask much more from him on that day. And as I say, he won't get a lot of the recognition. He won't get a lot of limelight in the media, but we can all recognise him as a first gamer who basically gave it all out on his first game out there. And if we can continue to see that and similar if he can keep it up, he'll play all season. And it's be great for him, because reading the stories where he's come from and all that sort of thing, it'd be a great story, and hopefully he can only get better.
Keep you going there, H, for the Shannon Knoll Award. Now, Shannon Knoll had a smash hit with Lift, and basically the award relates to somebody who needs to lift, which is probably there's a few we could throw that over this week. But who'd you land on?
Yeah, I went with who I thought was probably the most disappointing. I mean, you could put it over the whole almost senior group this week. It was a bit of a case of where were they all sort of thing. But the one that went missing the most, it's got to be Brad Hill. I'm not sure if he was just completely underdone or he's just wasn't ready for the game. I thought he was all right in what we've seen previously, and it just didn't look right. And hoping that it was just an off day, and that's why we've got to hope he just had an off day. And we can't have them every second week or anything. We can't carry a team doing that every couple of weeks. So let's hope that was really, really a bad day, and he comes out and has 25 and kicks 2 this week and can turn it around completely, because that's where it's got to start. It's got to start with the players of his caliber. And yeah, he lifts, we all lift.
If we've had a criticism of Hill in the past, it's that his bad games are non-existent, where, he doesn't get 15 in a bad day, he gets 5. So, and that was really evident on the weekend. But Nick, I think you've honed in on another senior player, the most senior of all.
Yeah, I mean, that's an unacceptable outcome from Jack Steele. I think we've all given him a fair amount of slack over the last couple of years. He's been banged up, and he's done a power of work, carrying this team on his back, often alone, and I think deservedly the guy can have some down games, but it's those moments when everything seems to be going against you that you need your captain at the coalface standing up and being counted. And I thought that probably for the first time that I can remember, he was a non-factor. Jack Steele was a non-factor completely in the game. Yes, he was outshone by Jack McRae and, obviously a bunch of the guys in the Crows midfield, but it's not often that Jack Steele essentially has one of those non-existent performances where he's just has no impact. It's not as if he racked up 25 touches and had 8 clangers and was just not efficient. He just had trouble finding the ball, and I think we haven't seen that from him much at all, if at all. And I'm not ready to say that I'm worried about him, but I'm concerned that maybe the way the game is played and the way that we set up, that we line up, and the way opponents line up and set up in the middle is maybe starting to pass him by. I hope that's not the case. I hope that maybe he was just underdone like a lot of our guys were, and that over the next kind of week or two that he works his way back into form. It is only one game. We've got to remember that and not go overboard at this stage. But yeah, little red flags.
Yeah, I think understandable. I mean, at times we've seen him respond to those little things in the past, and hopefully we get that, the Jack Steele leader role coming in. And look, I think it's right that the senior players are the ones in focus, but there's a couple of other guys. I think every year you need to find another midfielder, and this is more for going forward. I mean, a couple of these guys, Burns and Windhager, have played enough footy. Garcia, probably to a lesser extent. He's only a second-year player, and he wasn't too bad. Nor was Windhager for that matter. But I think we need one of those guys to, particularly now when we're under the pump a little bit, to find another level. We saw Windhager last year with that dominant game against Collingwood. Garcia has shown signs of it through the pre-season. I think we need to find one through those guys. I mean, Hill, 32, 33, Jack Steele, banged up, 30, whatever he is, McRae, 33 or whatever. We know that Philippos looks likely. Wilson might go in there. Travalia might go in there. And there are others. Sinclair can go in there. But I think those three guys, we've seen enough of them in the system, Garcia to a lesser extent, that we need one of them to take a step over the next couple of months and entrench themselves in the middle. So I'll throw them into the frame for that.
Just quickly on that, I was very tempted to put Hugo Garcia there. Decided to take aim at Steele instead, but Hugo Garcia, I think so many people cried out for him to be given an opportunity to play full-time midfield, based on the limited vision we had of him last year in kind of the sub role, and he'd come in and play 20 minutes and have 8 tackles and get 7 or 8 touches and that sort of thing, and have an impact in really limited minutes. This was his opportunity, like it or not, like the situation or not, underdone, players out, etc. This was his opportunity to come in and go, I deserve to be there, as a full-time midfielder and not have the subs vest on every week, or playing in the twos. Like this was his chance to kind of make an impact, and he's going to have that for a couple of weeks still, I think, but not a great start for those younger kids.
No, it wasn't. They all got outshone in that sense. We look ahead to the Cats. The injury list always raises a couple of eyebrows. I mean, Liam Henry, a chance for this week is promising. I mean, he gives us an enormous lift, but you worry about him being another one that would be underdone. But, I mean, you've got to play him somewhere. Mitch Owens, they said, was likely for Adelaide, so you'd think that given he just missed that, he should be okay. They ruled Sharman out for at least another week. There's a couple there that are of concern. I mean, Philippo and Howard, they're tracking the right way, 6 or so weeks for them. Taru back in training, but Dan Butler was 1 to 3 weeks last week, and he's 2 to 3 weeks this week. So that wasn't a 1 week injury. And we were concerned with the Max King news, and it came out, now not suggesting funny buggers or anything like that, but when he had that surgery 3 or 4 weeks before round one, when they said that he was still in the frame for round one, I thought, I don't know about that. The injury apparently quite similar to the one that Charlie Curnow had, which he's back from this week, I think. But and then Max King was listed as back by round 3. We're now at round 2, and he's listed at 2 to 3 weeks, which means according to the injury list, he's not going to play round 3. Then it's gather round, so you'd think he probably doesn't go to Adelaide given those concerns. So I think 2 to 3 weeks would suggest a round 6 return as a best case scenario. So that you do raise eyebrows at that, thinking, well, okay, so that's not a 3-week knee injury, that's a 10-week knee injury. So what is it? What's the issue there? Is it residual pain? Is it other things going on? But might be right in 3 weeks it misses 10 or 9 is a little bit surprising, Nick.
Yeah. How hard can we go at the club on this podcast? I mean, we're not responsible for them; they're not responsible for us. We're just fans.
Look, we're not the only one who does it, but yeah.
No, and you said kind of not suggesting any funny buggers, but I might be suggesting that there has been some funny buggers in there. This is not new for our club. We have been known to do this in the past, and Max King, if he misses 8 to 10 weeks, wouldn't be the first Saint to miss 8+ weeks, having said that it's a 1 to 2 week injury. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily all the club's fault, but I do think that they have a responsibility to be more transparent and realistic. They don't have to give us all the details of injuries. They don't have to give us access to players' medical history, but just be transparent and realistic about recovery times, because this is not new. This is not the first time. It won't be the last time, and this happens a lot with our footy club. And I would suggest, more so than most other clubs, there are other clubs that do it as well, of course. The timing was not ideal. Is there something around, The club's numbers on membership were down year on year. Did they want to make the announcement that our kind of franchise forward, if you want to call him that, is going to be out until round 6 or round 7, when you could quite easily say, well, he's in the frame for round 1. Does that play a part in it? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not involved in those decisions. We're not inside the four walls of the footy club. We're just reacting as fans. But this is not the first time that something like this has happened. And I dare say it won't be the last, because it seems to be part of the mentality, the culture, the environment, whatever you want to call it, the process of what happens inside that bubble. And that bubble seems to be a bit bigger at our footy club than at other footy clubs.
Yeah. As you're saying, just come out and say, okay, if it is a injury, we're not sure. We'd probably, rather than overestimate how long it's going to take him to get better than it is to underestimate. We can accept that they go, all right, yeah, his knee's no good. He's going to be out for 2 months. Okay, great. We'll be ready in 2 months. We'll see what we got. It's happened before. We've had to have other players coming through and doing different jobs. I mean,
immune to being disappointed, put it that way.
No, we've had that opportunity to look at different players and see what they can do. And it's a bit of, okay, well, he's not going to be there for that long. Oh, who can we put in? Who do we want to try? Who do we want to have a look at? Not like, oh, okay, they're there this week. Max might come back in next week for him, or that sort of thing. It's a bit of, okay, we've tried that player this week. Let's try this player next week. Let's try this player in this position next week. Let's mix it up. Give us that ability to think, okay, well, let's have some thought towards it, not every week going into Thursday going, oh, he's going to come in, 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 but he's not. So it's, as you're saying, just be a bit more realistic. Give us the hope that he's going to be back soon. But yeah, let's try to nail it, I guess. Let's be truthful and explorative, even with the different players. We might be able to work out what we can do.
Tim Membry the year before 2023 was, I think they said he missed the first 2 weeks. He played like once before round 12 or something with that, the knee that had to be drained and all of that sort of stuff. And obviously that sort of spiraled a bit as the year went on. So, I mean, what's the old saying? It's better to be slapped with the truth and kissed with a lie, or whatever the saying is. So just, tell us how it is, really. I mean, it's where we've grown up, knowing about all of those sorts of things. And look, maybe it's just a case with Max that it's frustrating and it won't settle down and it hurts when he runs or whatever. Like, maybe it is what it is and it just keeps growing and it stays the same and it won't improve. But yeah, you can't help but be a little bit suspicious of it. But I mean, it looks like Henry and Owens probably play, and then you hope that Sinclair and Marshall and Clark and Jones, if he gets up, are better for the run. Boxall probably would have played last week, but he was crook, which is not ideal. So you can sort of add that to the list. So do they pick him? Don't know. We'll wait and see what does happen. Cats, notoriously, consistent and reliable, but our pace, which we didn't see a lot of on the weekend, but our pace has worried them. We've won the last 3 against them at Marvel. Last year, we outscored them by 10 goals in the second half. The year before that, we belted them to secure our own spot in the finals. And the year before that, we came from, I think, 4 or 5 goals down to roll them again. So there is a blueprint clearly there that when we play them at this ground, we can cause them havoc when we play the right way. So I guess that needs to be the license, Nick, that, run, take them on, challenge them, their aging, if you will, group. I know they've got a bit of young talent there, but beat them the way you've beaten them before, or, at least, die trying, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think you're right that is the blueprint. We've got to outrun them, and that's going to be difficult when you've got a bunch of underprepared blokes coming into senior footy. And it sounds like that we will probably have 2 more. We'll know more in the next 48 hours, but it does sound like Henry and Owens are set to line up, or getting very close. But we'll see. But I think I think you're right. We have to run and gun. It's the only way we can beat them, because if we get pulled into a contest, man on man, physical contest with these guys, they're big bodies, just like the Crows, maybe even bigger and stronger, and they'll bully us again. And yeah, I can't remember who it was. Someone in the media was talking about, that we needed more pace, more run, more X factor in the middle, and clearly that's true. And obviously we were all hoping that Philippou was going to turn into that X factor in the middle, and we're not going to have him for another couple of months. But someone suggested that Jack Higgins maybe goes into the middle. Now clearly we can't afford to lose any more forwards, but maybe with Liam Henry coming back and him potentially not being able to run out a full game off a wing or half forward, maybe you put Liam Henry in a forward pocket or coming out of the goal square or something, because we know that the chaos that he can create inside forward 50 when he's given an opportunity. Maybe you do run Higgins through the middle for 5 minutes a quarter or 10 minutes a quarter, just to get some pace and some dare and some dash at the contest through the center of the ground. And we know he can kick long. Maybe it takes that X factor away from the goal square, closer to goals, but hopefully you can kind of fill that gap with Liam Henry and Mitch Owens coming back to, Mitch Owens to run through a few defenders and Henry to clean up the crumbs. And maybe that is the answer for a week or two, while we're still waiting for guys to come back. But you're right. I think that is the clear. We saw that in that game last season at Marvel. We were 5 goals down. And you and I had just about given up. We went into the bar and we're having a few beers, just watching on the screens. And all of a sudden, we kicked 3 in 5 minutes, and it was like, shit, game's on. So, anything can happen. I'm not putting it past us that we can win this, but we've got to, Ross and his team have to get these dudes over round 1 really quickly. Forget about it. It happened. It's done. Move on. We need to move on, and we need to move the ball. We need to move our legs, and we need to run and carry and try and do something ourselves. Not be so reactive, but be proactive. Win the ball, move it quickly, hit the scoreboard, and that's the way to beat Geelong.
Yeah, H. I mean, that would be my advice to fans. Would be that last week was the perfect storm, but we don't have to sort of say, oh well, I won't go this week. It's going to drift away from us, or the script has been written. Like, not necessarily. Like, players start to roll back. Now we find out what we're made of, what we can build, and why not? I mean, they haven't beaten us at Marvel since 2021, so they would surely have some trepidation looking at it, going, well, they keep beating us this way and this keeps happening. So you never know. Clearly they're favoured. Clearly we're still undermanned, but why not start it now? If we're 1-1 with a win over the Cats, then the Adelaide loss doesn't matter anymore. So
no, well,
why
that's
not?
the thing. You can
seize the opportunity.
Yeah, knock off who is at the moment one of the favourites for the season. They were running into the finals last season, and as I was saying, it only took us a half to completely tear them apart. We absolutely destroyed them in that second half of football. I mean, the team we're going in with is only, 25% different to what that team probably was. We're around about the mark, 6, 7 maybe players different to that game. It's, as you're saying, not impossible. It's our first home game. It's the first game at Marvel Stadium, where generally we play better than anywhere else. We get that crowd noise. The noise that was made during that game last year was probably some of the loudest it's been for a few years for us. And that's the sort of thing that will also lift them for us. They get that noise going. I mean, that's part of what Adelaide fed off last week. They got the crowd up, gets them behind them, gets them going, silences us. And it's surprising how much it probably does help the players. So if we can get there, make some noise, get some early goals, I guess, it's anything can happen. And as we said, we've done it all these times before. We did it back in, I think it was 2016 or 2018. I can't remember which season. The Geelong top of the table, we're struggling and
16,
knocked them off. Yeah. There's been plenty of situations where we're winning games that people go, oh, okay, they're not a chance at all. I mean, who would have ever thought Richmond was going to win last week? Anything can happen. Early season, anything can happen. And as I say, we've got the history against them. Let's hope that we can just keep that history up and keep our time slot, as it was quite often being called, the Saturday night Marvel. Keep our time slot ours, and send them home sore and with no points.
Now, our listener questions that we throw out to, hopefully we've addressed most of these. I'll run through them. Shay talking about plan B, C or D, given, we can't, due to injuries and lack of personnel, do we have to change things up significantly? Also asking about whether King is the new Hamill. I mean, I think in terms of changing things up, yes, we did a little bit of that last week with, having to play Wood forward and, this week it might be a case, as you say, if Higgins goes up the ground or, we change a few things up in that space. Was his realistic time frame on Mac's return, please? We kind of speculated a bit on that, maybe post-gather rounds. Bobber Khan, what hurts more, Ben King taking mark of the week or Ben kicking 6 goals too? Probably the one that hurt more was Finn Callahan barrelling through 2 Melbourne players to set up the winning goal at the MCG and looking at it going, geez, that would be nice. That was
after being the best player in opening round as well.
Yeah, he's a big boy, Finn Callahan, that's for sure. Big solid midfielder.
In that same game,
yeah.
That same game for the Gold Coast, Ben King was Noah Anderson, obviously ties to the club, having 36 touches, and Ben Long kicking 4 goals as well. Could have used him in the forward line.
But yeah, it's just seeing Ben King just effortlessly lead up at the ball with no injury concerns whatsoever. I mean, I know he got injured a couple of years ago, but what did he win the Coleman last year, didn't he, I think? So, yeah, or maybe not. Was it him or Charlie? Charlie might have won it again, but I know Ben was close. Then, Graham just asking about, obviously, Ross coming in with the underperforming list. I think the strategy around the list has been to turn it over, really. I think it wasn't just a case of, this list should be doing better. I think it was a case of they're in no man's land. We've got to be aggressive with this. And I think what Ross has done is kept us competitive through that period. So, Jesse Hogan won the Coleman. There you go. Thanks, H. But I know he was up around the mark for a fair chunk of the year. But it's I think we've seen probably what Ross is very good at doing, and that's squeezing every drop out of a list that probably had no right to do what it has done. So I've got no issues in that space. As I said, I think the direction's clear. I think the destination's okay. It's just we're in one of those little rocky patches of the road at the moment. So just got to hold the vehicle together and we should be okay. But first chance for Saints fans to get along, home game against the Cats. I know it was a bleak opening, but it's only this week and next week, and the next two are in Adelaide. So a good chance to head along and check it all out. But encouraging people to do so and fingers crossed for a better result. It can only go up from here. Go Saints.